This video is sponsored by Aura.
When I was running through my test the other day, I noticed something very interesting about this 16-inch MacBook Pro, and that is that when I was doing some graphic benchmarks, this M2 Max chip, this 38-core version, appeared to have some really impressive results. Like, it was scoring way ahead of what the M1 Max chip offered, and it was actually showing some just super impressive results in graphics performance. As much as we like to talk about like CPU performance, it appears that at least with these new chips, a lot of the focus has actually been placed on GPU performance, which got me to thinking, on this channel, we've done a lot of content going over, can a Mac play a game? And for the first time, I am actually very excited to see the results of how gaming on this 16-inch MacBook Pro turns out. So I got a few games I want to run through, including some games that really aren't optimized for macOS or even the Apple Silicon architecture, but I also do have a game that I think might actually show off the promise of this 16-inch MacBook Pro as potentially a future gaming platform for Apple. So let's go into this video. Obviously, I don't know the results yet, so I'm really interested to go through this with you and kind of experience it with you. But before we hop into our gaming session, I need to tell you how to protect your personal banking information and privacy with Aura. Aura is the ultimate line of defense against identity theft, as Aura monitors the dark web, constantly checking for compromised emails, passwords, social security numbers, and can instantly send you alerts to your phone or email if you were the victim of identity theft. Unfortunately, I just experienced this for the first time ever, as my own identity was stolen and a bunch of unauthorized purchases were made with my credit card. And that was one of my favorite features with Aura, the fact that I was able to set up a limit for my transactions on my bank account and my credit cards. And that way, if any transaction went over a set limit, Aura would instantly send me an alert notifying me that a large purchase was made. And of course, Aura can also provide near real-time alerts on suspicious credit inquiries, like if someone was opening a loan or credit card in your name. And yeah, identity theft, it's so common. There's a new victim every 14 seconds, and it costs the average victim over $1,000 in damages. So in the time that you watch this sponsor read, 3 people have already had their identity stolen. And now I can count myself as one of them. But don't take my word for it, because Aura is giving you a 2-week free trial with my link in the description below, or go to aura.com/GregsGadgets to try it out for yourself. So thank you to Aura, not only for sponsoring this video, but also for keeping my personal data safe. First of all, I got a couple games here on my Steam library that do work for Mac, so I do want to run through those. And first of all, why don't we start off with something that has a benchmark, just so we can kind of see what kind of results we might expect from this. So we're going to load up Shadow of the Tomb Raider first, and we're going to run through the benchmark on the highest setting. So this is great. This is what I want to see. We're seeing the frame rate go from the high 90s all the way into 100 frames per second, which is actually really cool on this MacBook Pro, considering it does have a 120 hertz display. So it can actually take advantage of those higher frame rates. And that is really nice to see. And I assume if you lowered the resolution a little bit more, you could probably eke out a little bit more frame rate. Obviously, if you change the graphics settings, we have this running on the highest settings, we could really focus this to shift more to frame rate to maybe hit a stable 120 frames per second. And even as we're going through this scene right now, look at that. So we're getting above 100 frames per second in this part of the benchmark. All right, and so far, we're off to a good start. So we're getting 90 average FPS. All right, now let's actually play some games. So now I've loaded up Counter-Strike Go. This is a pretty popular game to play, runs on Mac OS. So let's see how this shooter turns out to run. We obviously want really nice high frame rate. We don't want any stuttering frame rates when playing Counter-Strike Go. And we have this on the highest settings right now, and we're hitting above 60 FPS constantly. We're around 120 FPS, but I am noticing some frame drops as we get into these firefights over here. So that's not good to see. That's actually really disappointing, considering the game was running so smooth at the start. So at least on highest settings, we're not even able to achieve 60 FPS on this MacBook Pro. Oh, this is such a disappointment. I can't believe this actually. This started off so well, and now this might be one of the most disappointing tests that we've conducted so far. All right, so Counter-Strike Go turned out to be a no-go. I came up with that on the top of my head. But let's try something else. I got Metro Exodus in my Steam library as well. This is a game that I think when I did one of my last Mac gaming tests, it actually ended up performing decently. So I'm hoping we're going to have better results than what we just witnessed with that horrendous CSGO run. All right, so we're in Metro Exodus, and the frame rates are looking pretty good. Look at that. We're getting 192 frames per second. We were on ultra settings. Let's see, we got a little scene coming up here. The frame rate did not dip that much. We're getting above 120 frames per second on this game. This is running so much better than Counter-Strike Go, and this game is so much more visually impressive. It's actually insane how much better this is running. And again, this is not like the most well-optimized game in the world for macOS, so it's nice to see though that it's actually running. Look at this. This is running great. This is the promise of macOS gaming right now. Ultra settings, 160 frames per second. Listen to those fans. Listen to those babies whirl. When you do GPU intensive stuff on this MacBook Pro. Wow, oh my. Okay, so Apple Silicon has not completely solved the fan problem. You listening to this? This sounds like a Windows gaming laptop right now. Another like underrated thing about like actually like using this as a gaming laptop, the speakers on this are, I mean, I'm just guessing, they're the best like speakers on the market for a laptop. They sound really good. This is like a great entertainment laptop. I just wish more games ran like this right now, because this just looks so good. Now look at this. This is interesting. As we're getting to a scene where there's a lot of characters on this screen right now, look at the performance hit we're dealing with. So we're running at like 120 frames per second for most of like this initial run. It's very early in the game, right? Not too many things on screen. Look at this. So as we get to a scene, there's a lot of characters on screen. A lot of things are rendering. This is dropping just below 60 frames per second. So, we are dealing with not like the best scenario. So it looks like we're hitting above 60 FPS pretty constantly. Once we get into more of the actual gameplay, you can see we're getting a lot of enemies on screen over here, which could kind of trip us up. But we're still staying above 60 frames per second for most of this run over here. And yeah, this is really stable to play. It runs really smooth. Looks visually very, very appealing on macOS. So this is a nice surprise after going through what we experienced with Counter-Strike Go. Yeah, I could definitely play this whole game on macOS. It looks really beautiful. I'm actually having a hard time getting away from it, but I think we should move on and go ahead and test out another game. Okay, next we're loading up one of my personal favorites, StarCraft 2. StarCraft 2 is actually a game I played all the way through on Mac. So it's a game I guess I can speak more to the quality of how well it's running on Apple Silicon. And this does technically run on the Metal API. It's in beta though, I think it says. So take that how you will. So maybe it's not going to run the smoothest, but so far it is looking pretty stable. We have this on the ultra settings at 1080p. We're hitting above 60 frames per second, so that's what we want to see. But I feel like we should be hitting it a little higher. I'm not hearing the fan spin up. I don't think this is that well optimized to take advantage of all the GPU cores that Apple Silicon offers. It might be looking maybe more for like a brute force approach. Let's see. Let's get into an actual like bigger battle here. And we're seeing the frame rates. I can already tell. We're seeing the frame rates dip below 60 FPS. That's not what you want to see on a fast-paced game like StarCraft 2. All right, so we're loaded up into a different scenario. Over here, we got a lot of on-screen enemies for this one, so let's see how the frame rate fares. I don't think we have like the special effects on screen this time, but look at this. Oh, we're dipping into 15 frames per second. So StarCraft frequently features like lots of units going on screen and stuff like that. You're managing a ton of units, and this is unplayable to me. So we have not really seen too many good runs of StarCraft running on Apple Silicon at these higher settings. This has been pretty constant in my experience, at least with testing Apple Silicon for some reason. And just like we saw with Metro Exodus, that game runs great. Counter-Strike Go doesn't, even though these games are older. Maybe that's why. Maybe because these games are older, they're just not really optimized to take advantage of how the Apple Silicon architecture works. I don't know. That's for someone smarter than me for their pay grade. But all I can tell you is this game is not running well. It runs good when there's like not a lot of enemies on screen, but like I said, when you're playing the campaign and when you get into like a big battle online, dipping below 60 FPS is no good. Dipping below 30 FPS, though, is just, to me, it's unplayable. So, yeah, StarCraft 2 did not pass the sniff test. All right. Listen, we could go game by game. We could keep trying out these different games, older games, somewhat newer games or games that are more optimized, games that are less optimized, right? We could keep going through this whole rabbit hole. But what I want to do now is test what I think is probably the best possible scenario, a game that has been built from the ground up on Apple Silicon, and one that is actually a pretty recent release. So for this one, let's go right to the main event. Let's go test Resident Evil Village. I think this will be the best indication if we can actually call this laptop a secret gaming laptop. And I'll get to that after we run this. So I don't have a frame rate counter for this game. I couldn't figure out how to enable one. If you know how to do that, let me know in the comments below. But yeah, this game, at least to my eyes, I'm not noticing any frame drops or really anything that's concerning. This game appears to be running at least above 60 frames per second. I have it set to a variable frame rate at the moment. But so far, what I can say is this game for Resident Evil 6 is running very, very smoothly. And even like in terms of optimization for like an Apple Silicon optimized proper game, like you don't even hear the fan spinning up. The temperatures on the laptop appear to be much lower than when we were running a lot of those unoptimized games. If you remember during Metro Exodus, the fans were just whirling at certain points, whereas on Resident Evil Village, we're just not seeing that. So I actually figured out how to enable the HUD for the frame rate, and it's pretty much what I was guessing at. So now we have actual visual confirmation that this game appears to be running at 60 frames per second. It seems to be locked in at 60 frames per second with the quality setting enabled. I assume that's like high mode for Resident Evil Village. I haven't played it on PC. I played on PS5, so I don't know if that's what the equivalent setting's called or if it just kind of goes high, ultra, like it would on PC, and it's kind of more dumbed down for Macs. But yeah, this seems to be running extremely well. This is the best game we've tested in overall graphics and performance, and it just makes sense. Like even as we get into this engagement here, I am not noticing any frame rate drop, and we got a lot of enemies on screen. I just ran out of ammo, so this is not gonna look good. Let's see if we can oh no. And the frame rate just actually went up above 60 frames per second for that part of the video, so that's kind of funny. Yeah, so I'm obviously probably about to die here, but I think the conclusion's pretty good here. Resident Evil 8 Village, one of the optimized games for Mac OS. It runs well. It runs really well. And that is the promise of these Apple Silicon games. All right, I think we can end the test there. I think we have enough conclusion to draw. I know it wasn't that many games tested. I know you're like, oh, why don't you test like a bunch of games? Listen, I've been recording this for an hour and 30 minutes. This takes a while. You got to play the games a bit. You can't just like start it up and look at like the first screen and go, oh, it runs fine. You actually have to play the games to see if there's any like frame drops or anything like that, as we saw with a lot of the games we were playing. Because if you just boot it up and looked at the first screen, you go, oh, the game runs great. Some of them don't. But yeah. Here's what I've learned. What I've learned is that, is this 16-inch MacBook Pro, is it a secret gaming laptop? And I think the answer to that is kind of yes. And what I mean by kind of yes is what we saw at the end here with Resident Evil Village was that this MacBook Pro can run these games without spinning up the fans to crazy levels. You get really good locked in 60 frames per second performance with like really nice graphics, really nice visuals and everything. But it's a secret gaming laptop because the games actually have to be optimized for Apple Silicon. But to be more specific, should you buy a MacBook for gaming? Not yet. Not yet. I'm hoping that answer changes one day. I think it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of investment. These machines seem to be pretty capable, and as Apple Silicon evolves, as Apple gets better at building their own chips, don't forget, this is only their second iteration of the Pro chip, and it's already seeing really big performance gains in GPU performance. As Apple gets better on this, I think it's going to behoove them to really invest in the Mac as a gaming platform, and I think it's certainly in the best position it's ever been in to actually get games running really well on this platform. This is a unique architecture, and I think developers should be excited to develop for it, but I do think there's going to need to be some sort of financial push on Apple's end. Luckily, I think they got the cash to actually do that. So whether that's buying their own gaming studios and making their own games for the Mac, or whether that's just investing in like, hey, here's some money just make an Apple Silicon version, which I think is the best route. And these would do really well. These would do really well as gaming platforms. I just hope that Apple's heart is in it, because I would love to see that. But hopefully you found this video informative and helpful in deciding on, if the Mac can game. If you did, please give me a like. If you want to see more from the channel, make sure you're subscribed. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.